Hello and welcome to Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia's first ever virtual panel fundraiser. My name is Joanne Jones and I am fundraising manager here at PCFA. I've never done anything like this before, so please bear with me through any technical issues. I'm supported by the amazing Adam at my cause, so I'm sure everything will be fine. Like everyone, we're finding ways to do things differently, whether it's enabling our support groups to meet remotely or hosting fundraisers online. These are all examples of how we're adapting to the new normal. A huge thank you to our panel who have given their time and their expertise today. I know it's going to be a really interesting discussion. Before we begin, I'd like to say a special thank you to everyone who's donated toward the event. If you're watching us live, there is still time to donate on the event page. And if you're watching our recording, there is details of how to donate provided below. All funds raised will go to Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia, supporting men and their families impacted by prostate cancer, which affects 1 in 6 men in their lifetime. Like all other health issues, prostate cancer does not stop for a pandemic. COVID-19 has had a global impact like most of us have never seen. Australia is in an enviable position compared to many, and as restrictions begin to ease, we're all asking ourselves, how will we recover and what's next? Now, I'm really excited to introduce our panel. I'm joined by Dr. Nathalie Collins, Academic Director from ECU, Mike McKenna, CEO of Optus Stadium, and John Gelavis, Executive Director of Master Builders Association of WA. Let's get to know you guys a little bit better. Nathalie, let's start with you. Can you give us a bit of background on your role and experience?
Sure. I've been living in Western Australia for about 25 years, and I've been working for ECU for about 20 of those years. Most of my experience is in a business development role or project management with focus on income growth and sales and marketing. I currently work in the School of Business and with the School of Science. Part of my role is managing our locations in Melbourne and Sydney, so I'm very attuned to what's going on in New South Wales and Victoria at the moment, as well as WA. And my other role is as International Director for the School of Business. So I'm very, very proud to be here. I'm so honored to be here, especially with fellow panelists like John and Michael. So thank you so much for asking me.
Thank you. That's fantastic. And John, would you be able to give a little bit of an introduction for yourself? John, I'm sorry, you're on mute. Can you try that again?
As a first start, so John Gelavis, Executive Director of Master Builders Association in WA. I've been in the building construction industry for close to 30 years, a range of roles, working for a range of organisations such as Bunnings, CSR, Laminex Australia, the Housing Industry Association and Master Builders Association. So been in the industry a long time, but very much in sort of business management roles and sales, marketing type of positions. And I'm a board member of the Prostate Cancer Council in WA, so I'm privileged to be in that position with other board members as well. And look, the building construction industry has changed dramatically in recent times, and even more over the last couple of months. So it's very daunting but exciting at the same time.
Thank you, John. And finally, Mike, can you give us a little bit of an intro?
Sure, Joe. My name is Mike McKenna. I'm CEO of Optus Stadium. I work for a company called Venues Live, which is a company which is contracted to the state government of WA to run Optus Stadium. I'm a relative newcomer to WA. I've been here for 3.5 years. I came over to do this job, having had a background in sales and marketing for quite a long time. Most of my recent roles have been in sports. I was previously 12 years in the executive team at Cricket Australia, and prior to that spent some time at Essendon Football Club. So our role reporting to the government is to basically run the stadium on their behalf, keep it safe for the fans that attend there, and generate lots of money, hopefully, to help pay for not only our facility, but also a lot of the community facilities that's run by Venues West on behalf of the government as well. So I'm enjoying the role. It's quite a challenge at the moment. I've recently joined the board of the Tourism Council of WA, had a particularly challenging time for the tourism industry. So hoping to bring some expertise to that board, who are working very hard on behalf of the industry to try and free up tourism back in WA.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to all three of you for joining me this afternoon. Nathalie, I think I'll start with you with our first question today. What have the main impacts been to your industry due to COVID-19, and how have you pivoted what you do for your clients, customers, stakeholders, students in your case?
I mean, one of the things that has really impacted our industry is the ability to leverage the movement in and out of Australia. So the export industry around education is huge. It's one of the top 5 industries for every state and all over Australia. An inability to get international students here not only affects the economies of those around us, but also affects our ability to fund ourselves. Over the course of decades, the government has looked to universities and said, you know, you can fund yourself by basically bringing in people who will pay full fees for courses. And when we can't do that, then, you know, obviously that becomes problematic. Some universities are in better positions than others, and you can read the news and find out how everyone's doing. It's pretty transparent, but that's been challenging. Many campuses in Western Australia are still considered safe spaces, but we obviously observe social distancing. I don't know of any campus that has shut down completely. But another thing that we recognize as universities is we are safe spaces for our students during any time. So what that means is that some people don't have places at home to shelter safely. Some people come to university campuses as a way of being in a place that they can not only study, but exist peacefully. We recognize that we provide that to our students, and we as universities have continued to do that. You know, the job impact around university, I mean, something that's actually quite in common from all three of us here on this panel is we have our business, but then the flow on businesses all around us are huge. So the impact to our communities that are impacted beyond us is pretty big. But we are lucky in a way that, you know, maybe my colleagues' businesses aren't as much, which is a lot of learning can be done online. And so in a lot of ways, our business, or a lot of our business has carried on. And as long as the technology is working and you know, everyone is patient with everyone when they mute themselves or they do whatever it is, or they can't video in, you know, a lot of learning can still take place. And ECU particularly is extremely digitized. And so we made that transition where we could really seamlessly. And we've reached out to our students and our staff on a regular basis to see how they're going. And the reaction's been enormously positive. Particularly, I find that in Western Australia, more than in other states in Australia and more than other places that I've observed, people do really feel like this is a joint effort, and they've gotten on board and been really flexible. And that's great to see from an organization as large as ours. So although some things haven't changed that much, we're really highly digital before, our ability to move our agendas forward, research, teaching and learning, being a member of our community, have been impacted, while also leaving room for some innovations that were maybe kind of sitting in a corner until now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I guess it's quite fortunate that things have become quite digital in that learning space, so you can adapt a bit quicker and a bit easier. Mike, it's probably obvious what the impacts are to your industry, but it might not be as obvious to know how you've pivoted and for your clients and customers and stakeholders during this time. Would you like to give us a bit of insight on that?
Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, our business has been seriously impacted. We're probably first into this crisis and probably be last out of it in terms of being able to have people come to our venue. We're all about bringing people together. So the very opposite of what you'd be expecting at this time. So we've had no income for I think the last event we put on was 23rd of February. We've had no income since then. Our business really has been about trying to manage that change, and we've been looking at reducing costs, obviously. So in being responsible to our stakeholders, the most important thing is to get their costs down so that the money we're burning it isn't as high as it could have been. The stadium is designed to be always on virtually. So to be able to collapse down and then close down the facility has been quite a task. There's an awful lot of, we got about 51 retail food outlets. We've got about 18 premium product spaces, all with fridges and freezers and lighting and air conditioning, all those sort of things. So, shutting those down has been a big part of it. So reducing those costs. I'm looking at reducing our labour costs. So we've had a few people out in secondments, out to particular Department of Health, helping them with their surge in their needs. But we've also spent a bit of time looking at how we can help the community. So first thing that we did, fortunately, was able to host the West Australian Police Emergency Response Centre. So they're headquartered at the stadium. They've had up to 100 members in there working 24 hours, 7 up until recently. So servicing them, but not only with the facility, but also with IT services and food and beverage, those sorts of things, keep them going, has been a really important part of what we've done. And we've also produced meals for the community. So so far we've produced about 20,000 meals, which have been frozen and now being distributed to people who have needs. And it looks like that'll continue. So we'll continue to produce those for both the Department of Community Services and potentially some local government needs. So being able to use the facility in a way that is helping the community in this crisis is important. And keeping the venue front and centre in the minds and the hearts of the population has been important, because they can't even come and use the parkland up until recently. So, to be able to stay in their hearts and minds has been a pretty important part of what we've been trying to do. Because the real stakeholders of our venue are the taxpayers of WA, who, looking at the very expensive facility, not being able to use it, I'm sure they want to know that it's being used for good purposes.
Thanks, Mike. It's really inspiring to see that although this is a tough time for you and your team, you're still finding ways to give back to the community. That's amazing. And finally, John, what have the impacts been to the construction sector, and how have you pivoted what you're doing for your stakeholders?
Oh, look, the potential for I guess the impact of us was severe. On the sizes, it's a $25 billion sector, 120,000 employees in it, plus the multiplier effect right across the community. So it's one of the big I guess sectors in WA. So we had the potential. That the key thing that we focused on initially was to try and keep us operational, and that was making sure that we got information out to our members right away around social distancing and hygiene requirements on building sites, and that was happened really rapidly. We were able to set up a website, a web page on our website within 4 days, and unload sort of templates and guides and information to the members they could download and access to ensure that they comply with those requirements, and communicating with government that we were complying and the industry was doing the right thing. And it's almost like just to keep operational. That was really crucial, I think, for the industry, and we're able to do that quite successfully. So, and the way the industry operates on building sites changed dramatically from I guess not just social distancing, but staggered shifts on building sites, and how many people you have in lifts, and those sort of requirements. Subcontractors on building sites at one at a time, and there were a range of things that changed the way the industry operates, and the industry really reacted extremely well. From an internal perspective, we focused very much on 4 key areas. Just initially our people, so making sure our people were safe. We moved to remote access pretty much right away, and I've got to say we weren't using Teams or Zoom previously, but we're very much sporadically. But now we sort of live by it. It's sort of really changed the way we operate internally and the way we engage with our committees and our volunteers. Sort of changing that whole process. That's been really well received. I guess with the members, we bunkered down and made sure we focused on our members with phoning them regularly about making sure they were okay. And we've got well over 1,000 members in Western Australia, and that was well received by them. And the fact we kept the industry operational was critical too. Also, the support around our brand was important to maintain that presence, but also for us to work as a team to make sure we were looking after our members and delivering all of those. But one of the key platforms obviously been online, very, very strong, and bulked up very much our social media communication, and that's enabled us to communicate with our members as well as government, policymakers, the community on a range of different initiatives that we are undertaking. So and that was really important, because I think that's really where a lot of information's being transferred politically and amongst our industry. So that's been really successful, and we shifted our training to less face-to-face, more to online. which has been really, really successful too. And a lot of our regional members who haven't had access to, it's all had to be face-to-face, about to maybe drive up from regional WA, are now getting access to online training that's supported from an industry perspective. So it's been a lot to come from this, and I guess in terms of the way we operate, as much as it's been a terrible sort of pandemic to have to go through, and the anxiety around our members has been quite dramatic, but we've been able to work through the process together. And I'm also on the Mates in Construction board as well, and we've had a strong presence on mental health within the industry too, and that's been really, really positive. I think that the Mates in Construction organisation has really done some great job out on building sites and talking to a lot of our people within our industry, making sure they're okay through this time. So, look, it's been a real transformation the way the industry's generally operated.
Thank you, John. That's fantastic to get that insight. I think all the people on the call or the video right now, all of our areas and industries are very results driven. Mike, I'll start with you this time. Have you had any good results or surprising results over the past few months?
Yeah, I think the key thing I think we found is that people have come together and supported one another through this. I think it's not just in our business, clearly right across the country and probably across the world, people have felt the need to reach out and support people. And we've seen that through a lot of media reports, but I think everyone's had a personal experience where people are more inclined to try and support one another, to be more empathetic, to be more patient and tolerant, and accepting of differences. I think that's the key thing I've seen. That's surprising, I guess, but when you think about what society is like, we generally do tend to pull together in crises and then revert to sort of normal behaviour when we're not under pressure. So hopefully some of these behaviours that we're seeing will stick, and that we'll be able to transition back to a better way of working, a better way of living, and probably a better society overall as a result.
Wow, fantastic. And Nathalie, I know how competitive academia is and the world of universities, and again, very focused on results. Have you had any good results or surprising results lately?
Well, I'll tell you something that's probably surprising to people who aren't in teaching and academia, is that young people aren't as digital savvy as you might think. And in fact, what we do all the time, when we're teaching students, and I know that high schools do the same thing, is we try to engage students in digital activities that are going to increase their employability, but may not be as fun as TikTok or whatever else they're doing. Okay, and that's really, really challenging, because we know that when they hit the workplace, and I hope that Michael, and I see John nodding, and I hope Michael will be nodding too, knowing how to do a function in an Excel spreadsheet or a pivot table, it's not as sexy. But hey, that's what people want, right? So one of the benefits coming out of this is that our students have been basically forced to develop a lot of the skills that they're going to need from an employability perspective. They need to be more self-taught. They need to be more independent. They need to have better time management. They need to be able to be a little bit more self-motivated. There's this kind of idea of the sage on the stage, academic, who's the one who's, it's from this font of knowledge you will get everything. And it doesn't work that way even in the workplace. If your boss knows everything, then what are they paying you for, basically? So the ability of our students, our mature age students who've been in the workplace a while, believe it or not, their digital literacy is not only great, but they know how to teach themselves and learn. The younger someone is, the less likely they're going to be like that, because that's actually a really new experience to them. Likewise, overseas students, depending on where they're from, are not necessarily very independent learners. So one of the advantages we're hoping to come out of this is that in a sense, this class, the commencing class of the COVID era, will have a jump start on these digital skills that mean better employment. And it will also drive home the point that part of what we're doing at universities is creating knowledge workers that go beyond borders and go beyond an office. This idea that you need to be in an office is an antiquated one for us. Learning can happen anywhere, and a lot of the work that we train and develop people for can happen anywhere. So the digital and the importance of digital is something we've been preaching, but we haven't been able to illustrate very well. Thank you, COVID, for illustrating that to us.
Well, that is interesting. And John, any surprising results from your experience these past couple of months?
Oh yeah, I think it's been quite amazing. I think how I mean, look, from my staff's perspective, how well we've been able to adapt and focus on the cause. You know, and there's been cause along cause that's keeping us operational too. When we had display home restrictions lifted, as around the campaign around the industry's open for business, and now it's around how do we secure stimulus for the sector. So each way along the way, we've had these causes as it's gone from a health crisis to an economic crisis. So we've been able to shift so quickly because we've been very much focused around the issue at hand, where we might have had a number of issues we were dealing with prior to COVID. But I think this has quite focused us on particular issues. So I've been really, really amazed and around that. The other thing that's been quite amazing, we've had an increase in people wanting to be members of the association. So as much as there have been concerns around the impact and cost, we've had people that builders or subbies and others that may not have been members of Master Builders wanting to be members, and then accessing the information to help them through the period, like things like industrial relations advice or legal guidance, safety guidance, all that stuff that they probably in some cases took for granted, and now going, well, I need the support of an association, and then I can see the work that they're doing in advocacy, so I want to be a part of that. So where we probably thought that membership might have been impacted, we've seen a gravitation to the organisation. Maybe it's the stability of it, or maybe it's been part of a team and a group where the self-isolation has maybe caused them to not feel part of a group or family. So I don't know, it's hard to put a handle on exactly why that's occurred, but we've certainly seen over the last couple of months a spike in membership applications, but we hadn't seen too many resign their membership, which is interesting. Hardly any, to be honest, and we had a retirement. So yeah, that's a bit of a phenomenon. And then the engagement in online training, as I mentioned, the reaction to that has been quite interesting. There's been finally, you guys are doing more online training than you did before. In the past, it's been this old traditional, you've got to come in, it's got to be face-to-face. And that's been really good for us to acknowledge that. And the feedback from our regional members, like I say, has been really quite amazing. It's been great. We're so glad that we're able to do that and move in that direction. So yeah, there's been some surprising outcomes. And I think the other thing is surprisingly how quick government are reacting, where previously they were taking time to do things and getting it all right, and now they're in a lot of cases reacting very quickly, and the government in place at the moment are reacting very quickly to deal with the issues as it progresses. So and I think that there's probably less bureaucracy. I think there's more of a willingness to try and keep things moving and keep things flowing, to keep the industry going, all industries, not just ours, but the mining sector and the hospitality sector and education and all those sectors. Let's just try and help everyone, because it's impacting everyone, not just one or the other. So I think that's been really good, and government's been very keen to engage in conversations, and they're very consultative generally, but it's being heightened through this process, which I think that's been really good too. So yeah, it's changed a lot of the behaviours, which has been quite good to see.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've all noticed a change in pace around decision making in a lot of different areas. Natalie, I'll throw to you first for this next question. What would your advice be for organisations who are facing a period of uncertainty? Where are you focusing your energy at the moment?
So my area of research is in authenticity in commercial spaces, and I've done a lot of research into authentic management, which is a really, really fun topic that I can talk about for hours. But I'll make it really succinct. When you look at leadership in organizations, particularly in times of crisis, one of the things that's very important is that leaders act the way they normally act, right? That they don't take on a persona that is different. And what's unfortunate is if you have someone who's hysterical normally, they're just going to, and they get more hysterical during a crisis, it's not necessarily helpful. But I think one of the really great examples of leadership that we've seen is from Mark McGowan. Regardless of what side of the fence you're on politically, he's become incredibly popular during this time. And one of the reasons for that is things have been changing really rapidly, and he's not been in denial about that. And so he's kind of become, he's become more of a place where we go to get the real information about what's really happening. Yeah. Being transparent, honest, clear, being very conscious about boundaries. I'm sure you can't tell us everything that's happening, and why those boundaries exist is really important. If you treat your audience like they're stupid, they will think you are. People are sophisticated, and even children are quite sophisticated. And so I think that's really, really important. We're very lucky here at ECU. Our vice chancellor and our people in leadership are out and about all the time. In other words, staff members across our 3 campuses here in Western Australia know who these people are. They've met them before in person 1,000,000 times. So when you see them, you are not surprised by them. They don't seem foreign to you. And that's also, really important. So that outreach and that leadership during this time is important. It doesn't solve every problem. There's still insecurity around jobs, and students are anxious in the first place. They just get more anxious when things change. But having a steady hand on the tiller is one thing, but having an honest and true and transparent hand on the tiller is important too. And we can't forget the value of that.
Thank you. And John, where are you focusing your energy during these uncertain times? And is there any advice you would have for other organisations going through a similar thing?
I guess being a member-based organisation, our focus is absolutely fairly and squarely on the members. So making sure that they come out of this as best as they can. So that's checking in frequently on them and making sure they're okay. So and look, if you're in a commercial environment, it's you're checking in on your customers and we don't see them as customers, but as members, we're making sure that they're okay. They've got the information they need, whether it's an interpretation of JobKeeper or whether it's an industrial relations matter around restructuring their organisation, or it's changes to the planning system that we've seen announced yesterday. That interpreting that, how are they dealing with that? How can we help them? Rather than wait for them to ring with an inquiry, we're proactively calling them. Our membership team are proactively calling them. Our professional service staff are actively calling them. So it's about us going to them rather than waiting for them to come to us. And it's a bit of both that's happening at the moment based on that. So our team is we're sort of focusing very much around absolutely the member, because that's what they expect. And look, the advocacy is the other area, is making sure that we advocate to government on the fact we are all the things we're doing, and we're taking direction from them and the Chief Health Officer, and we're obeying those requirements to keep the industry working and operational and doing it safely. And that then supports, obviously, our members too. And we're continually going back and forth to government, talking to them about that. If they've got concerns, we deal with those. And we're talking to them now around what the industry might need in terms of stimulus measures to help the industry as it goes forward. So it's very much around the members, but everything we do is around them. If it's advocacy, if it's member services, if it's proactive calls, and then our awards programs probably go more online rather than face to face, and that's another adaptation that we probably in the past was all about. We've got to do our awards face to face, and so we've managed to change that. We'll sort of change that approach up, and So yeah, my advice is obviously to connect very much with your stakeholders. Without our members, we don't exist. We've been going for 122 years now, but without them and what they want and their essential needs, that's where I think that you need to focus. That's where we're focusing our attention, and our structure is set up to support just the essential needs of them. There's a lot of stuff you could do on the peripheral that's going to add additional cost and additional work hours and time, but does that really help the member, or if you're in a commercial environment, does that really help the customer? So that's been our focus, and I've sort of focused the team very much on that. And look, I think the fact is they're actually loving it. We're engaging really well with the members, and the feedback from the members coming back has been really, really positive. It's great to hear you guys on the phone to us, seeing if we're going okay. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Thank you, John. Mike, your industry is probably one of the ones facing the most uncertainty at the moment. Where are you guys focusing your energy at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think like most, it's all around communication. And for us, stakeholder management. And our stakeholders really, right at the moment, have sort of firmed up into three key areas. One is government, and making sure that the government knows that as a private operator, we're looking after their asset and their finances. We've just produced a budget, which isn't pleasant reading, given that we've had at least half the year without any income whatsoever. So that's making sure that they understand what we're doing to minimise the losses while we're shut down, I think is key. Our owners, making sure that they also know that we're doing the responsible thing with our staff and the opportunity we have to do some things differently while we're shut down from events. And I think most importantly, it's our staff, and we have both a very large casual team as well as a permanent staff. And the key thing for us, and it's the same thing for everyone, I'm sure, is just to be honest through this period. There's a lot of talk in the marketplace, lots of speculation, lots of rumours, lots of gossip, and people can get quite confused and quite worried. So that what they know when we talk to them, whether it be in person or whether it be on a Teams meeting or in a communication like a newsletter, is what they'll hear from us is only facts. We won't speculate on stuff. We won't propagate rumours, other than a few memes that you might get that are pretty amusing. But it's really making sure that they can trust us. We work pretty hard with our casual team to get JobKeeper payments for them, and then we got about 600 and something people paid JobKeeper. Now, that was a long, protracted process for us because of our reasonably close relationship with state government. But in the end, we were successful. But all the way through that process, the communication was, we're working hard on it. We can't guarantee anything. We'll tell you as soon as we know. And in the end, we were able to be successful. But if we had been unsuccessful, it wouldn't have been a surprise. It would have been a disappointment. With the permanent staff, we've gone through this period, and right up until yesterday, had maintained all of our staff. And yesterday, unfortunately, we let go some people and stood down some others. Again, there was no real surprises in that. They knew where we were and that these outcomes were likely. It doesn't stop people being shattered by people who are giving them news and those who are receiving it. But it's always been honest communication. I think that's what's going to get people through. If you try and hide the truth, or you try and guess what's going to occur and get it wrong, you're not going to have any credibility. So, yeah, that's why I'm spending most of my time, and most of my team are doing the same thing. It's really tough, and some of the news isn't great, but all you can do is be straight up and down.
Thanks, Mike. I think transparency with staff is really important, as you say. I think that will get us through, as will the memes. For our next question, I'll start with you, Nathalie, if that's okay. Of the behaviours we have engaged in during COVID, which do you think won't stick but should?
I think that the independence of knowledge work has been very interesting. Do we really need to come to the office? That's a really big question mark. I know that the people at the university, anecdotally, that I've worked with, who are always about those in-person meetings, all of a sudden managed to transition. And the issue wasn't necessarily the other people; it was more them. And so I'd like to see that level of flexibility. The ability to get expertise from non-geographical locations. Do you really need to be in the same city, in the same state? We have people in regional Western Australia who are unbelievably underemployed, who would be amazing in roles here in Perth. Do they need to be in Perth? Is an excellent question. So, I'd like to see more of that remain. I'd like to see a lot more of the collegiality remain that we've been able to cultivate. I'd like to see the care and the respect for our health workers and our essential workers remain. ECU has one of the most amazing and reputable nursing schools in the country. We train so many health professionals, including paramedics. And I see these young people come through. I mean, they're all younger than me now, so they're all young. But I see these young people come through and about to embark, on these careers, and they're not all physically safe careers or mentally safe careers. There's been a focus and development on mental health, and I think less of a stigma about loneliness and about coping and anxiety in these times that I'd like to see stay. What's unfortunate is that all of those things, I think, will slide back a bit. I don't see them all remaining, because I think that there's too strong a tide, in the other direction. But if there's as leaders of organizations, if there's anything we can do to keep hanging on to those things, I would certainly be all for it.
Brilliant. And Mike, what about you? What Behaviours have you seen during COVID that you'd like to see stay but suspect might not?
Well, there's lots of things that have been really positive. I think people's patience and understanding of each other and the differences of, whether it be themselves, their home situations, and the ability to work from home and the trust people have and people getting the job done when they're at home. That's all been fantastic. I think the thing that's been really beneficial for us, having had a really hectic 2.5 years since we opened, is the hours of work have gone back to something that you would actually say is healthy. When we work in the event industry, we have crazy hours. We put on events at stupid times on weekends, and they generally go back to back for weeks on end. So we have people who, because they're event people, seem to thrive on that, and that becomes part of their persona. That I can work all night and all day, and I can get up and do the same thing again the next day. So having had a period of time where they've been able to work more regular hours has been fantastic. That's the challenge is actually when we come back to normal operations, we actually put events through, is finding a way for people to be able to do that again. And even though they might work long hours for an event, then not feel a need to come back in first thing the next morning and go again. And hopefully they've been able to work out that they can actually have another life, that they've found the fact they do have families living at home, and that they can actually get on with them. So for us, that'll be the thing that I hope sticks, but I think will be one of the bigger challenges.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, absolutely. I can 100% see how that would be the case. How about you, John? Any behaviours you've noticed that you'd like to see stay but suspect probably won't?
Oh, look, it's weird. I mean, I guess I've been from the industry. There's a lot of camaraderie. So there's a lot of shaking hands and stuff like that, and that's been a big part of our culture, I guess, as an industry. And I guess having the social distancing, I think people are looking to just come back, re-engage, and being able to do that, or just connect in that way. And that's probably something I've seen that's probably distancing. See people really waiting to try and embrace someone, but that's been really a bit of a challenge. But I do agree with Nathalie and Michael in a lot of ways. What we've seen is where in the past, I mean, certainly from our perspective, saying that you've got to come to the office and you're working from 8:30 to 5, and they're your working hours, and you don't necessarily work from home unless you really have to. And I've just been really amazed with the way we've been able to work remotely, and the productivity's just been fantastic. And I think that I suspect the will, as we go forward and start implementing our return to office campaign, or our return to office process, is that we'll look to how we tend to operate going forward. We've got a lot of our staff with young families, and they've been working from home, and it's been amazing. They've been able to do all those sort of things they need to for their family, as well as produce outstanding work as well. So yeah, I think that's something I really like to embrace more, and the way we go forward as an organisation, the use of technology, but being able to work remotely has been really, really great to see. And I think that will change. And like I said, I think from what I'm hearing, people I do talk to, a number of ways that they'll change their approach on that basis. They've been quite pleasantly surprised with that process, and it does remove that norm about you have to come to the office. But mind you, what I have seen is some of our staff can't wait to get back in the office and engage again. So it's a bit of a tale of two different personalities. Some are really happy working at home, but some I just can't. One of my staff just like, John, can I come back to the office and work? Because so okay, but so yeah, what I've seen is that different personalities are excelling in different areas. I think that goes back to that flexibility that we need to have in the workplace going forward. So yeah, I think that's been a really interesting observation for me. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I think you and Mike both mentioned families and people with kids there. COVID has shone a light on some differences in our society, and not just financial, and our abilities to work from home. What were the differences you felt were the most pronounced, and what do you think could be done to close the gap, or what did you do to close the gap for people working from home, with the differences and the different challenges that they had? I'll go to you first, John.
Okay, all right, yeah. No, I think, look, working from, I guess having children, young children to begin with is no doubt a challenge, and having been through that, myself, it is very, very difficult, and that being able to manage the anxiety and of COVID, plus the having young children and having work, and was the whole thing's been very stressful for everyone. But I've been just astounded with the way that, certainly what I've seen our staff with young children being able to adapt, and I think working from home's been quite good as well, because I know just that everyone just feels a bit safer, and that's shone through in the way they've adapted to the changes in the production and what they're producing in terms of the workplace. Been amazing. So yeah, I think it's been there's a lot of anxiety, I think, by everyone having to have young children and going through this. But I think we've really trusted all of our staff, and I think that's an important factor too, and they've done very well, performed very well. Regardless whether they have young children or not, but I think it adds a complexity. But then sometimes you might find that if there's something going on, they might have to deal with that issue with the children at one stage, but then they'll catch up at another during the day. It might be after 5 o'clock, but they're always doing their work, and at the level they need to be doing. So yeah, the adaptation's been really pleasant to see.
Thanks, John. And Mike, I suspect there would have been some clear differences with your team in terms of who can work from home and who can't. Have you been able to close the gap on that, or do you have any insight on how we could do that in the future?
Yeah, there's certainly differences, people who can and can't. There's a small number of people who just simply can't work from home. I think in this period of time, we've been sort of moved towards a lot of project-based work. So even people who would normally be stadium-specific roles are actually able to work from home in this period. I think what it's done is it has shown that there is differences in people's situations that need to be accounted for. I think what it has just shown is the really important role that school plays in allowing people to work the hours that we ask them to work.
Yeah.
And when it's not there, it creates a real challenge for us. So I think hopefully schools can continue to operate the way they always have. But what it does around that is not just with kids, but with elderly parents and extended families, puts challenges on people in different ways. And I think hopefully now we're a little bit more attuned to the differences. There's a little bit more out in the open, the fact that people do have different circumstances. I think the key thing really is to ensure that people's jobs are really goal specific. We know what their goals are. They know what they are, really clear goals. And that perhaps more people need to know what each other's goals are, so that when they're operating differently, delivering on those goals is more important than the hours they work or where they work. And if they're doing the job, hitting the goals, then there's no issues with how they go about it. But up to now, I think that a lot of that stuff has been kept between a manager and the employee. And even if they do know their goals, it's theirs, no one else's, which creates a little bit of imbalance when you've got people who are office-related, event-related. Maybe they're more manual labourers. They don't understand the differences. So when people are not there, it creates jealousy and suspicion. So having clear goals that are shared and then celebrating when people have achieved those takes away a lot of that mystique and allows us to be more trusting of one another.
Thanks, Mike. Nathalie, I'll go to you next. COVID has shown some light on the differences. What were the differences you felt were most pronounced, and what do you think could be done to close the gap?
I think one of the things that's interesting is how many devices people assume exist in a household. For example, I live in a two-person household, and I think we have about maybe 4 computers per person in my household. So we've got no shortage. However, when you have kids that are learning online and they need to use the devices at the same time as the parents, is there a place that everybody can speak without being overheard? Even the affluent have found that maybe their houses aren't quite big enough, for everybody to work from home at the same time. I think that it's been very confronting for parents to confront their own limitations in terms of what they know through trying to support their kids through learning. And I think, obviously I feel like it's really hard to be a parent because you didn't have a kid to, have to teach them calculus. That's not one of the joys of children, I don't think. So, the limitations that exist in our assumption that everybody can do things from home is limited. And it's not just about childcare. when you're in management, you have this problem, and it's that not everybody's the same. Different people have different abilities and different strengths and weaknesses. You do have some players who aren't as productive as other players, and you keep them on for whatever reason it is. When you have this kind of environment, these differences become more pronounced. And employees are extremely acutely aware of injustice. Some employees see unfairness where it doesn't exist, and differential treatment, especially in Australia, where being treated the same or equally is such a traditional Australian value, can really be challenging. So, one of the things that one needs to do, again, is be very authentic and transparent in terms of what's expected and the ability of some people to achieve that expectation in the way they would like, and not. One of the things that we see when we look at, for example, the Australian HR Institute, which is one of our accrediting bodies, has some amazing work that they do in the management space. And we look at how people are being managed from a distance. Many supervisors are not entirely clear on who's doing what in many team environments. And so, a lot of injustice is being allowed to occur now that people are kind of out of vision, right, and working asynchronously. And so I think that managing that it's just really, really challenging. And one of the things we like to assume in all of the conversations about working from home, and I've written a few articles about that, whatever, there's kind of this assumption that everybody's productive. But we in management know that's not true. And there are lots of people who aren't when they come to the office. So how do we manage them from a distance? And I think that's a skill set managers need to take on board.
Thank you. And I'll stay with you, Nathalie, for this next question. There are a few heroes and villains who have emerged from this era. Who do you think will emerge from COVID with the halo effect from the way their experience was managed? And what managerial lessons can we all learn from watching things unfold? We mentioned Mark McGowan earlier as someone who's probably getting that halo effect.
Yeah, so Mark's got a big halo effect because when you get screamed at a drive-by in Rockingham, that's when you know you've arrived in Western Australia. So, that was his big moment. But I think, Jacinda Ardern also, in her short tenure, she's had a terrorist attack, an earthquake, a volcano, and now this, and she's also had a baby. It puts a lot of pressure on us women to watch her and go, oh, but what have I done? What did I do today? I didn't save anyone. She's one. I think one of the things that I'm really excited about is the halo effect on scientists, because I think that was sadly lacking and going in the other direction quite strongly before this. Dr. Anthony Fauci, is just a really great example of someone who's just impeccable in their approach. He's basically a science diplomat. And, our Australian scientists, I don't know if you're aware, but in Greece, who's been handling this really well, their chief scientist is an Australian-born man of Greek descent who's moved back to Greece. The way the Australians are taking lead on the world stage is wonderful to see. I'd like to see more of that. We punch above our weight in science, we punch above our weight in knowledge, and we're not always acknowledged for that. So I think a big halo effect around science, hopefully a lasting halo effect around health workers, that would be really amazing. And there are emblematic people. Unfortunately, I think that Donald Trump will end up with a halo because he makes his own and he can afford them. So he'll always have one.
Yeah, I think you're right. What about you, Mike? Any heroes or villains that you think are gonna come out of this experience, and what have you learned or observed from other managers during this time?
Yeah, well, I think, and I agree with Nathalie that Mark McGowan has really stood up in this environment, and he's come across as a really strong, decisive leader. But not one that's not willing to give when he needs to. So he has backed down on a couple of things that he was very strong about and done it the right way. So I think he's come out of this very positively, but I think it's too early to judge any of them, to be perfectly honest. I think you've got a lot of politicians and chief health officers who look pretty good at the moment, and have gone through a pretty tough time, made a lot of pretty good calls in this country and in New Zealand, and some pretty poor ones elsewhere, but we'll concentrate on people we know. But I think the tough bit's yet to come, and I think this is where the politicians will earn their money when they have to make a decision that's on balance between the medical and health advice and that of economists, because we can't keep on doing what we're doing right now. We've got to find a way out of this, and it's going to require a balanced decision. I think the first part of it is absolutely all about the health advice. It's about getting on top of this, making the hard calls, spending the money that needs to be spent, closing down what we need to close down. But now that we're on top of it, or seemingly getting close to that, how do we get out of it without absolutely ruining the economy and leaving a legacy that's going to be very, very hard to recover from? So I'll judge all the players at the end of this when we've come out of it, and hopefully we're in good shape and they can all put a halo on, and we'll all clap and applaud them and re-elect them and enjoy watching them probably bask in their own glory, which they probably deserve if we get out of this in one piece.
That's true. I think they're all earning their way at the moment. I don't envy them, I have to admit. What about you, John? What managerial lessons have you learnt from watching leaders and seeing their halo effect, and do you think it's going to last? John, I think you might be on mute.
Yeah, so someone like Mark McGowan, I mean, we deal with his office quite a lot and have done through the process. And having probably known him through that for about 6 or 7, 8 years, I don't see a change in his personality too much at all. I think getting back to what Nathalie said, I see, before this happened, even probably when he was in opposition, I just see the same person. I don't think he's very, very authentic. So that doesn't surprise me in the way his rating is. But I think for me, look, the healthcare workers are just, some of the images you're seeing on social media is just, absolutely unbelievable. And I think they are very much the heroes and heroines in all this. They have just, you just can't imagine being in that situation, having to deal with that, this day to day, and then going home and then doing it again. So, look, I mean, the politically, I know we've spoken about a few different people. I think Roger Cook will come out also, because it's a health crisis now, and I think in his role, I think he's done particularly well in this as health minister. But it's going to become like an economic issue, and that's when I think see the likes of probably Ben Wyatt step into that, that fray now that it's becoming an economic matter. We'll see probably Roger still there, but I think the likes of Ben Wyatt as treasurer will probably step up and start to talk more about the economic recovery. So I think there are different heroes for different situations, and I think we're starting to see some of that play out. Very, very difficult, obviously, being in opposition as well during this time, because you want to provide support. I think it's a bit of a balancing act for many on the other side of the political spectrum about how they support it. But I think they've all acted in very, very, very well, trying to support everybody through the process. So, yeah, it'll be interesting how it plays out. I think even Scott Morrison was probably sort of come out fairly strongly in this process too. So, but for me, it's the healthcare workers. I think they're the ones that deserve a lot of the credit, and the medical fraternity that probably don't get the pat on the back that they should. And I think teachers as well that have had to sort of, having to sort of be in that environment when the kids come back and the disease itself. So yeah, I think healthcare and the teaching fraternity both are really strong for me.
Thank you, John. I'll go to Mike for this question. I'm very interested to hear your answer. You mentioned memes earlier. What have you done to engage your team and stay connected during a time of social distancing? How important is it to be able to have a bit of a laugh?
Yeah, it's pretty important, and it's pretty hard to do, really. So some of the fun stuff we've done is, we've had as a lot of people do, a tradition of Friday drinks. We've continued that, and we've done the occasional one, which is all in. You've got about 100 odd people all on Teams, trying to have their say, which is great fun. But generally, we've done department groups, but we've moved, like a lot of people have, to a Teams environment, and it's not just the communication on Teams. We've actually moved a lot of our files onto Teams now, so we're saving files. We're using chat facilities. And we're able just to use that tool, and it actually stood up really well. We were worried early on about how it would go when millions of people around the world started jumping on the system. And Microsoft and Teams have held, they stood up really well. And even our local telecommunication systems obviously have stood up to the load in most cases. So that's worked really well. It's in a lot of ways it's pretty boring, but using the sort of the occasional newsletter, which we do from every week, just to try and keep people connected. Silly things like memes, but also stuff sharing recipes. In lockdown, where can you buy toilet paper this week? All those sort of things that were interesting early on, and just as we move through it, just changing now to a little bit more communication about returning to the office and what that's going to be like, and getting people used to it. And we're moving back from Monday, and we're moving back to where we left off, which is split offices. We had 2 teams working because we obviously didn't want to get one taken out, and we've got a responsibility coming up at some stage. We'll have to run a football game probably for crowd, or not for crowds, and then eventually for crowds, and we can't afford to have our entire capacity taken out by one person walking in the office with a virus. So we're going to continue to do that. So that's going to be interesting. Again, we're still going to keep people connected, probably by outdoor meetings in the middle of winter around the stadium park, socially distanced. We'll see how that goes in the colder months.
Might make those meetings go quicker, Mike.
Might be very short.
How about you, Nathalie? How have you engaged your team and stay connected during this time?
Well, in my role, I'm traveling all the time. And so the thing that's been really odd is to physically see me in person in the office. And people have started to get like a little bit nervous that at some point I'm going to freak out and throw myself out a window because I can't be on a plane somewhere and I'm so used to it. Because I move around so much, my teams are all virtual digital chat anyway. And so my teams in New South Wales and Victoria, my students in New South Wales and Victoria, we keep in touch that way most of the time. And I've trained my students from very, very early on. And if any of you are out there watching, I did send them the link, that they need to be digital and they need to be virtual from day dot. So here in Western Australia, what it's done, it's actually increased my relationships with my peers because we have been coming to work. We have offices here, which is like a rare luxury. We can close the door. And so we've been social distancing, but I've been able to liaise with in person more. And so I'm a big proponent of digital. I'm a big proponent of asynchronous working. And so this has actually forced me to stay in one place. I couldn't even go to Bunbury, which is usually my escape for a while. And so I've been home every day. And even my dog is starting to look at me like, when are you going to, when are you going to leave it? So it's been a little bit of an opposite thing for me, but I do feel like we've developed some strengths, and those strengths are here to stay, and they may advantage certain groups of people, particularly people who have issues around their mobility. I think that's really fantastic. But yeah, I'm just trying to cope with being here.
It's a bit of a different situation to what some of us are finding ourselves in. How about you, John? How are you staying connected and engaging your team at the moment?
Well, it's funny, the whole idea of being on a Zoom meeting was the first part of the novelty factor, so where we weren't using it before to great effect. So, and that still lasts, and then it became the what fancy background can you put on your virtual background, and so there's a bit of that going on, and that's a bit of fun, and we've got some staff. We do our morning update on the sort of trivia questions, and they just do bits and pieces. And so that's probably been one of the challenges. How do you keep people motivated and interested in what's going on? And we've also tried to do it by a range of campaigns. So we've got one campaign to the next campaign, and it could be a social media campaign. So we'll go and focus on that. I think. So what Michael's saying, just focusing on specific goals, I think helps narrow focus on the key things that matter, and everyone gravitates to that. And let's get around that. And then what's the next thing? So clear direction, I think, is really, really critical. So much as we're sort of trying to create a fun environment, we're also working on things that we all have a shared focus on. It's all about being you might not be in a team in the office, but you're in a virtual team working on a goal, on a team goal. And I think that creates a really good feeling. It's just not someone doing something and getting an outcome on their own, but no one can share that reward. So, and it's really been good. Some of the things that we've been able to achieve has been done as a collective rather than one person. So, yeah.
Thanks, John. We're basically at time, guys. It's been a fantastic chat. Just to finish off, I'll start with you, Mike. Are there any other insights you would like to share, and what can we feel optimistic about?
Look, I think we should feel optimistic that things will return to normal. And I think we've got to take that sense of optimism. The thing that does worry me is that we bake in this fear of social contact, and that social distancing becomes a mantra. If we're well on the way to controlling the virus in this country, and assuming that there is no sort of outbreak that we can't see coming, and as long as we keep our borders shut until such time as there's some sort of other solution, we should be able to go back to something like normal, and we should be encouraging that and embracing it at the earliest possible opportunity, because we are social. And the world's gone through lots of these sorts of crises before, health-related crises, and bounced back from them and continued on. So I think we should be looking to some stage to work out how we return to normality and how we bring people together in a way that is more natural than standing 1.5 meters apart and trying not to touch each other. That's not normal. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to do that, and that our leaders will help take us there with support from people like ourselves, who hopefully will be lobbying for a return to normality when it is first available.
Fantastic. And John, anything else you'd like to add before we finish up? Anything you think we can be optimistic about?
Yeah, look, I think the fact is we've only got 3 cases in WA, and number of days, consecutive days, and so I'm really buoyed by that. I'm very optimistic. I think, like in any case in life, you have to be positive, and you have to look to the future and not to the past. And I think there's a great opportunity now, once we're sort of getting through this, to be really optimistic and positive about where we're going and how the state's going to come out of this, and how the country and even the world's going to come out of this. So we have to be optimistic, we have to be positive, and focus forward and not back.
Great. Natalie, over to you.
I think, one of the things that I've been really proud of the position that Australia has taken. I've been very proud of this position that Western Australia has taken, but I've also been really proud of the position that universities have taken. If there's a vaccine, or if there's a solution to this problem from a health perspective, it doesn't come from any other part of the economy, but the knowledge economy. We at universities, we find ourselves, and this is my opinion, by the way, not an ECU opinion nor Edith Cowan's opinion, I just want to put it out there, that we sometimes find ourselves bruised by kind of an anti-intellectual superiority, where universities are just ivory towers where people just, I don't know, burn Bunsen burners and and sit and ponder their navels. Well, actually, no, we put together real solutions that have impact, and there are people from universities all over the world who are working together now on a variety of solutions to a variety of problems, economic and otherwise. But it does require everyone, and we're not the only ones that are going to do that. But when it comes to a direct health solution or a vaccine, those are the kinds of things that universities do, and we contribute. And so I do hope that science and what we put together and what we do continues to be valued long after the health crisis is over and the economic crisis is over, and particularly here in Australia. We feel so much part of the community, and it's great when the community loves us back. So at the moment, we're feeling that love a little bit, and I'd love for it to stay. So if you haven't been to your local university campus, please come along and enjoy it. They are open, safe spaces, plenty of social distancing, free Wi-Fi in most cases, and you should come along and see a bit of what the state has to offer in that sense.
Thank you so much, Natalie, John, and Mike. It's been a real privilege to be able to talk with all 3 of you this afternoon. Thank you to everyone who has joined us. If you enjoyed our discussion, you can show your appreciation by making a donation to Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia, either on the event page or at the link below. We really appreciate you joining us today and for your support. Thank you.